it is clearly mentioned here that one has to meditate upon the expansion of Vishnu. The word kashtam refers to Paramatma, the expansion of Vishnu. Bhagavataha refers to Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Godhead is Krishna. From him comes the first expansion, Baladeva. And from Baladeva come Sankarshana, Aniruddha and many other forms, followed by the Purusha avatars. As mentioned in the previous verses, Purusharchanam, this Purusha is represented as the Paramatma or Super Soul, a description of the Super Soul upon whom one must meditate will be given in the following verses. In this verse, it is clearly stated that one must meditate by fixing the vision on the tip of the nose and concentrating one's mind on the kala or the plenary expansion of Vishnu. So we are reading here Kapila's instructions to his mother on dhyana, Ashtanga Yoga. And today he is saying in this verse, Yada manasvam virajam yogena susamahitam. That mind which is very agitated, which is very turbulent, which is strong, which is flickering, should be susamahitam, should be controlled, made steady, and virajam, and free from impurities. So yada, when that happens, yada manasvam virajam, yogena susamahitam. How do you make the manas virajam and susamahitam? Yogena, by the practice of yoga. Then what should one do? Kashtam bhagavato dhyayet. One should meditate, dhyayet, kashtam bhagavato. One should meditate on the Lord. And more specifically, Prabhupada has mentioned, one should meditate on the expansion of the Lord, who is Paramatma in the heart. Kashtam bhagavato dhyayet. Kashtam refers to the expansion, plenary expansion, and svanasagra avalokanaha. And it is said, even Krishna mentions that in the Gita, that when one meditates, one should not close his eyes fully, nor should one keep his eyes fully open, but half closed eyes, and focus on the nasagra, tip of the nose. Nasa agra, svanasa agra avalokanaha. So this is the process of dhyana that is mentioned by Kapila Deva. So the important point here is that the mind has to be purified and made steady. In that state, one will be able to do dhyana, meditate on the form of the Lord. And so there are many methods of making the mind steady and purify the mind. One of them is the Ashtanga Yoga. There is a verse quite similar to this in the Bhagavad Gita. We will take a look at this. Krishna's instructions in the 6th chapter, which is about dhyana. Jitatmanah prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukha dukkeshu tatha manapamanayoho. Krishna is mentioning something very similar to what Kapila has mentioned in today's verse. Jitatmanaha. Here, Jitatmanaha refers to one should conquer or control the mind. Jitatmanaha Atma can refer to the mind, can refer to the body, can refer to intellect, can refer to the soul, can refer to super soul. All of these references are there. But here, Atma refers to the one who has conquered the mind. Jitatmanaha prashantasya. And one who has become tranquil, very steady, very peaceful. Generally, the nature of our mind, if we all examine, we see that the mind is dragging us and is running after impermanent things. We want some kind of a gratification of the senses. We want some other kind of a happiness that our senses and body can give. So, the mind is, and all of these things that the mind is looking for are impermanent things. So we are permanent, we are spirit soul, but the mind is right now after the impermanent things. So now, as a result of this is nicely expressed in the Bhagavatam verse, Manorathena asati dhavato bahihi. Manorathena, ratha is a chariot. So the mind as if sitting on a chariot, and dhavato, and is running after with great force and speed. Dhavato, asati, asat dhavato. It is running after asat, not eternal things, but asat and external. Dhavato bahihi. Manorathena asati dhavato bahihi. So this is the nature of a conditioned soul's mind. And when the mind is running after the impermanent things, the mind will never be peaceful. Will always be very, very agitated. That is the nature of sense gratification. Sense gratification never satisfies and creates more and more desires for gratification. The typical example is like that of the itch. You see, where sometimes you have a wound or something and you feel like itching. And then when you itch, you feel some kind of a pleasure. But then you still want to itch more and more and more and more. And you'll never be satisfied till it becomes a wound and starts bleeding or something. So that's the nature of sense gratification and mind running after impermanent things and never is satisfied. So the first principle of yoga is that such a mind should be trained and controlled. And yoga is one of the processes of training the mind. Ashtanga yoga that we are reading about is one of the methods by which the mind can be trained. So when the mind is trained and conquered, jitatmanaha, the natural result of that is prashantasya. Jitatmanaha prashantasya. When that happens, when the yogi has come to a stage of jitatmanaha prashantasya, what happens? Krishna says here, Paramatma samahitaha. Paramatma samahitaha. And Prabhupada has written very nicely, translated. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. Paramatma samahitaha. He has already reached the super soul. Means he has come in touch with the super soul. And when a person has come in touch with the super souls, Paramatma samahitaha, what happens? Shitoshna sukha dukkeshu tatha manapamanayo. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Actually, this is describing that one should come to the spiritual platform. Because only when one comes to the spiritual platform, you can come in touch with Paramatma. Let us read the purport of this important verse, how nicely Prabhupada describes this Paramatma Samahitaha, coming in contact with the spirit, with the Paramatma. Very similar what Kapila has mentioned here. When one's mind has become virajam, susamahitam, yogena, by yoga, at that time kashtam bhagavato dhyayet. At that time you can actually properly meditate on Paramatma. And Krishna has said here that if one has conquered his mind and has attained tranquility, he has already reached the Paramatma. He has become absorbed in the Paramatma. Paramatma samahitaha. Purport from the Gita. Actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. Every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the system is like this. There is the soul and there is Paramatma. And the soul is actually part and parcel of the Paramatma, of Krishna. And so naturally the soul is to be directed by Paramatma. It's like this. Like say for instance you have a computer system. And you are working on the computer. And then you also have a printer which is part of the arrangement that has been given to you. And then after you look and work on the computer, and then you want to print, and you give a print command. And then you are waiting at the printer, but it doesn't print. Right? Then you wonder, hey, what's happened? I gave the print command and it is not printing. And then you look at the printer carefully, but the printer is printing something else. It's not printing what you gave command for. Then this is not, something is gone wrong. And then you look around and you see that the cable connecting the printer is not connected to the computer, or something could have happened. And in fact, it's not connected to the printer, not connected to your computer, but it is connected to something else. That's why it is printing something else. Right? So this is considered, when that happens, we try to fix it because it's not the right thing to it. The printer is part of the system that's been made available, and so the printer has to be connected to the computer, and when I give a command through the computer, the printer must print because it's part of my system that has been given to me. So in the same way, the printer is part of the system. In the same way, the spirit soul is part of Krishna. Krishna and the living entity form one system. And so when Krishna gives an order, the living entity must abide by that because it's part of the system. And now what has happened? It is not abiding by the directions of Krishna and doing something else. Then it is something, so that looking for the cable and connecting to the computer, it's like that's the yoga process. How to connect the printer to the computer because it's all part of one system. So, Prabhupada begins this purport by saying, actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. Because we are part of Krishna. We are not in any way disconnected from Krishna. And if we are disconnected, we should connect back. So, now what happens when the spirit soul is not connected? Prabhupada explains nicely. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Now, in this example, the printer is not printing when I give the command from my computer, but it is doing something else, which means it's connected to something else. Where is it connected? It's connected to some other network somewhere else, right? And it is taking that command and printing. So, a similar situation has arisen in our case. The living entity is acting not according to the command of Krishna, whose part and parcel the living entity is, but it is taking the commands from somewhere else and it is acting. And what is that somewhere else? What is that something else? And that is the external illusory energy. So this is the situation that we are in. So the living entity is, when the living entity is disconnected from Krishna, and the living entity has a mind, and that mind is taking direction from the external illusory energy instead of taking directions from Krishna. And then what happens when the external energy starts directing the living entity? One becomes entangled in material activity. This is the situation. When we don't take direction from Paramatma, we take direction from the external illusory energy. It is external and it is illusory energy. And that is giving constantly direction to the mind. And based on that direction, the living entity is acting. When that happens, the living entity becomes entangled in varieties of material activity. Like we see in the television sometimes, on the television debates happen. 4, 5, 6 people, they are screaming sometimes and talking some issue, this, that. Actually, what's happening? All of those people, they are discussing some issue, and they are all supposed to be intelligent people. They are using their intelligence and arguing this way, that way, and so on. But actually, all of them are being directed by the external illusory energy. And they're all having different viewpoints and arguing from their different viewpoints, and based on all of these arguments finally result in some kind of an activity, legislation, rule, or whatever, law, and people involved in that. And then in this way the living entity is becoming more and more entangled. Very complicated. Material activities are very entangling. And although they have the best, they're all very intelligent people, we cannot deny. They are intelligent, they are using their sharp intelligence, analyzing different things. But unfortunately, they are being directed by external illusory energy. And this happens on a big scale. It happens on a small scale in our personal lives, and it happens on a big scale on a national or on an international level. I was reading an article some time back. It was an article about World War I. And it happened for nearly 4 years. And there was one particular battle in the World War, the Battle of Somme, happened in France. And lot of planning happened between the Allies, the British and the French, against the Germans. And they planned for many, many weeks and months, and then they attacked. But whatever reason, the very first day of the attack, 20,000 soldiers from the British army were killed, and another 37,000 were wounded in one day. Just see the scale of activities that living entities, big leaders of the society, big political leaders, they plan and do so many things. And just in one day, imagine 20,000 people dying, men, soldiers. And it describes that how the bomb shells were exploding, and these men were marching, and then they would raise their hands up, scream and die. Hundreds and hundreds, and then another group of soldiers were sent, and they would be marching, and they will die. 20,000 in one day. And some big men were involved in planning, and there were big politicians who were involved in all these things. Just see how the living entity gets entangled, being directed by an external illusory energy that this is my kingdom, we should win this kingdom, we should control. And both groups are thinking in different ways. This is how material nature is. Very, very entangling, very difficult to overcome. Even if one has the sharpest intelligence, this is the nature of things. And so when the mind is misled by the external energy of the living and external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one is to be considered as having already reached the destination. One has to abide by the superior dictation. So if one has controlled the mind through one of the yoga systems, then one is to be considered as having already reached the destination. So there are many examples like this. In modern days, there is something happens, especially in our country recently. There are, in most of the big cities, we have something known as a literary fest. And a lot of writers, and they all come together and they discuss different books. And it has become a big phenomena in our country. A lot of intelligent young people, they go there, they hear a book, they discuss a book, they analyze a book, 2 days, 3 days, and all of these kind of things happen. So all of them are actually very well-meaning, very intelligent people. They're discussing different issues, social issues, historical issues, political issues, varieties of issues, and they use their best brains to analyze. But unfortunately, they're all under the influence of the external energy and not aware of the truth about the soul, about themselves. They are analyzing different issues from different perspectives, but they are not analyzing who is that who is analyzing all this. I am analyzing. Who am I? Who is analyzing all these things? This important thing they miss out. And such literary discussions, even though it is Chitrapadam, there is a very nice Bhagavatam verse, na yad vachas Chitrapadam harer yasho jagat pavitram pragranitha karhichit. This Chitrapadam means very nicely composed. Very nicely composed literature. If it is not harer yashaha pragranitha, if it is not description of Hari's glories, Lord's glories, which is Jagat Pavitram, it can actually purify. Descriptions of the Lord can purify the whole universe, can purify the whole world. Tad vayasam tirtham ushanti manasaha. Such literature, which is Chitrapadam, which is very nicely composed, but it is not in description of the glories of the Lord, that is considered to be Vayasam Tirtham. Vayasa means a crow. Unto a pilgrimage of crows. Prabhupada translates that very nicely as a pilgrimage of crows. You know, when crows gather together and quack, and they also seem to be discussing something very important there. And what is the subject matter that they are discussing? What attracts a crow is some dead matter, some foul matters, and putrefying matter, and that is being discussed by the crows. So it's called Vayasam Tirtham. Very strong words Srimad Bhagavatam uses. Shrotavyadhini Rajendra Drunam Santi Sahasrashaha Apashyatam Atmatattvam. So these people have created a lot of subjects for discussion like this. Why have they created all of these? And why it is not beneficial? Because all of such topics have been based on ignorance of the true self. Who we are. What are we? What is our situation? What is this material world? How we have come into this world? What are we supposed to be doing? This knowledge is not there. And under the dictation of the external illusory energy, they are analyzing their various things and discussing and writing books and having literary fests, and all of these things are going on. Just see on such a big scale, human activities, grand activities are taking place, but they are all under the dictation of the illusory energy. So, when one practices yoga and controls the mind, then an important thing happens, that the external energy influence diminishes and finally vanishes, and another influence begins to operate, and that is called Paramatma Samahitam. We'll see here. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one is to be considered as having already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no other alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. That's the nature of the mind. The mind has to get some dictation. But when we are not connected in yoga to the Supreme, the external energy keeps giving the dictation and we keep acting. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma or Super Soul. This is an important thing. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma. The result or effect of controlling the mind, you switch the control, you switch the dictation coming from the external energy to the dictation coming from the Super Soul. So, Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahitaha. So, how important it is to control the mind, control the senses, control oneself, and become peaceful. So, this is so fundamental to the yoga process. And if that is not there, then we have not made progress. Now, this is all about Ashtanga Yoga. You do the pranayama, you do the asana, you do the yama, niyama, dharana, and in this way you virajaha, susamahitam, you control, you purify the mind. How does all of this, and this way paramatma samahitaha, how does that work in Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada explains. This is the last few sentences. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. So, how does this work in Krishna consciousness? How do we come to the point of coming in touch with the Paramatma? And Krishna consciousness, always Srila Prabhupada promised that it is much easier than all of these other processes which are difficult to practice in this age. And that in Krishna consciousness, that happens by one very important step. And that is when we come in touch with a pure devotee spiritual master who is an external manifestation of Paramatma. In one place, before 1965, Srila Prabhupada, before he went to America, he was writing, publishing Back to Godhead magazine. In one of the articles, Prabhupada writes, which we read incidentally this morning as part of the Mangalarati reading. Prabhupada used one phrase: if one comes in contact with the proper devotional, proper disciplic succession. In other words, there are many disciplic succession which is not proper. There are so many disciplic successions are there. That's why sometimes you go to a spiritual organization, you ask, they also have our guru, this. They will, some disciplic succession they will describe. One has to come in contact with the proper disciplic succession which is coming from Krishna and passing on that message without any change as it is. That such a disciplic succession we should come in contact, and an acharya coming in such a disciplic succession, he is an external manifestation of Paramatma, and if we abide by his direction, we are already in touch with the Paramatma. But this good fortune does not come about so easily to everyone. Very few people. Even in the field of spirituality, there are people who are still under the direction and dictation of the external energy. Just that they are wearing a garb of a spiritualist, they're having a long beard and maybe grey hair, and they talk on lot of issues and in a very good with oratorical skills, and people say, "Oh, so nice, sadhu, he's speaking." There are so many of them in our country, even now. And they can analyze different subject matter. But all their analysis are on some mundane matters, mundane issues. They are not representing the disciplic succession, a proper disciplic succession. Once Prabhupada was asked, Srila Prabhupada, how nicely you explained some of the philosophical things. And when devotees were thanking him, Prabhupada said, I am not done anything great. I am simply canvassing on behalf of the disciplic succession. So Prabhupada considered always that what he was speaking, he was presenting the message of the disciplic succession. And that is what we should be doing also. Not present our own message, our own analysis, but represent the disciplic succession, and that viewpoint we must present. Then we are benefiting the person who is hearing and benefiting ourselves also. So, such a spiritual master that is why the Bhagavatam is saying, Acharya mam vijaniyan nava manyeta karhichit namartya buddhya asuyetha. Krishna saying this in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quotes that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Acharya mam vijaniyan. Such an acharya who is coming in the disciplic succession, mam vijaniyan. You should consider him to be me. As good as me. Because when you hear from him, it's as good as hearing from me. Because you are in a conditioned state, you cannot see me. I am adhokshaja. But if you are fortunate and you come in touch with an acharya coming in the proper disciplic succession and you hear from him, it's as good as hearing from me. And that is why such a spiritual master is to be regarded as good as the Lord. Acharyam mam vijaniyan na avamanyeta karhichit. And such an acharya should never be disrespected. Na martya buddhya. Martya means something that is, martya loka means this material world, this mortal world. Everyone comes and dies here. That's why it's known as a martya loka. Na martya buddhya. He is not to be considered as an ordinary mortal, because he is representing the Lord. He is an external manifestation of Paramatma. Such a spiritual master should be regarded as good as God. These are the qualifications of a spiritual master, who should be regarded as good as God, who is coming in the disciplic succession, not an imperfect soul. And if we come in touch with such a spiritual master, Paramatma Samahitaha. So this is the advantage, that how, and if we follow the direction, and that is why when we come in touch with such a spiritual master, how you should take his directions? Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittete Koriha Aikya. His directions you should aikya with your heart. Make it one with your heart. Which means you should live by those directions. Your life, everything you're thinking, your aspiration is now guided by those instructions. Earlier to that, we were living and our lives, we had aspirations, and as per the dictations of mind, and the mind was getting the dictation from the external illusory energy. And now, when we change that, we take the direction of the spiritual master seriously, then now we are now under the direction of Paramatma. That becomes possible. And such a spiritual master, namarthya buddhya asuyetha. Such a spiritual master is not to be considered as an ordinary human being. So just see how fortunate we are all. We have come in touch with the proper disciplic succession. We have come in touch with a spiritual master who is actually to be regarded as good as Krishna, who is an external manifestation of Paramatma. And if we live by his directions, we can make spiritual advancement. And that is the kind of an advantage Krishna consciousness provides. A lot more easier than these Ashtanga and other processes of yoga. We'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.